What if the person sweeping your office floor once held the key to changing the world? In Austin's buzzing tech scene, where billion-dollar ideas are born overnight, Elizabeth Carter was hailed as the queen of innovation. Yet in the shadows of her empire worked a man no one noticed. A man who, years ago, was whispered about as a genius. But now he was just the janitor. Invisible. Disposable. Forgotten. Until one night, Elizabeth caught him doing something that stopped her cold. It wasn't what he said. It wasn't even what he did. It was what he knew. And in that moment, she realized, if she ignored him, she could lose everything she had built. What happened between them next would shake Torchlight to its very core and force Elizabeth to face a truth no investor, no rival, no enemy could prepare her for. Let us know where you are watching from in the comment. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our stories. Austin's skyline glowed like molten gold as night fell, reflecting off the glass facades of the city's tech towers. The streets buzzed with energy, startups humming, scooters zipping, neon signs blinking like pulse beats. Yet inside an old converted warehouse on East 6th Street, Elizabeth Carter's world moved to a different rhythm. The soft whir of servers, the faint smell of disinfectant, and the muted clatter of keyboards formed the heartbeat of Torchlight, her brainchild, her rebellion against the Silicon Valley elite. Torchlight wasn't just a co-working hub, it was a sanctuary for outsiders. Young engineers who had been ignored by investors, coders whose accents were judged, women whose ideas were dismissed, they all found a place here. Broken chairs, mismatched desks, and chalk-streaked walls could not hide the energy that thrummed through the space. To Elizabeth, every line of code, every prototype drone, every sticky note was proof that a world too rigid for dreamers could still be conquered. She had built Torchlight with a single rule: talent matters more than pedigree. It had not been easy. She had started alone, scraping together savings, living in a leaky apartment above the warehouse, eating instant noodles while negotiating with landlords and local electricians. She had been dismissed at every major firm she applied to, her ideas stolen, her voice silenced. Those battles had carved her into the leader she was today, a CEO recognized as one of Austin's boldest innovators. But success brought its own shadows. Whispers from rival hubs, subtle smirks from investors who doubted her judgment, and the quiet envy of employees who measured her ambition against their own insecurities created tension Elizabeth could feel in her bones. Torchlight's future wasn't just built on ideas, it teetered on her ability to navigate invisible wars. She had been pacing the main hall late that evening, thinking of deadlines and funding rounds, when she noticed a figure at the far end of the corridor. A man moved slowly, mop in hand, cleaning the polished concrete. At first, she thought nothing of it. Then, in the glow of the overhead lights, she froze. The face was familiar, unmistakable. "Alex," she whispered. The mop froze mid-motion. The man's head lifted, revealing eyes older, wearier, but undeniably the same. He gave a faint, guarded smile. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Alex Martinez. That's what it says on the badge." Elizabeth's chest tightened. Memories rushed in. Summers spent under the scorching Texas sun sketching circuits and prototypes, afternoons solving puzzles that left their teachers baffled, evenings when he had shielded her from bullies who mocked her stutter. He had been her partner in every small victory, her protector, her brightest friend. And now, standing in her empire, he was a janitor. Invisible. Reduced. Her mind raced with questions, but words faltered. Shock and nostalgia collided with a quiet ache she hadn't expected. How had someone so brilliant ended up here? How had life carved this divide between them? The room felt colder. The hum of servers seemed louder. And for the first time in years, Elizabeth Carter, the queen of Torchlight, felt the sting of seeing a hero from her past diminished, standing silently at the edge of her world. The smell of hot asphalt and cut grass carried Elizabeth back instantly. She was 10 again, racing down Maple Street, her worn sneakers pounding against the sidewalk as Alex darted beside her, sketchbook clutched to his chest. Summer sunlight turned his curls golden at the edges, and every idea he whispered seemed bigger than the world. They had dreams then, wild, untamed visions of changing everything. Machines that could think, codes that could predict the weather, circuits that could fly. Elizabeth remembered the afternoons sprawled under the old oak in the park. Alex's hands were never still. He was always building, tearing apart, imagining. One day, he had said, eyes shining, "We'll make people see the impossible." She had nodded, heart pounding with the thrill of possibility, believing that together, they could outpace the world. School tried to tame them. Elizabeth's discipline pushed her forward, top of every class, her name on every honor roll. Alex? He was brilliant, yes, but the weight of a fractured home pressed down on him. His father's long absences, his mother's exhaustion, they swallowed up hours, days, opportunities. While Elizabeth mapped out scholarships and Ivy League dreams, Alex drifted, caught in small jobs, small victories, and obligations he never asked for. Yet, even as life separated them, the bond lingered. He was the first to lend her his lunch when hers had been forgotten. He had thrown himself into a scuffle when bullies mocked her stutter. He had stayed up late, helping her crack a math puzzle that even the teachers admitted was beyond her years. Their shared victories felt like secret treasures, moments of rebellion against a world that demanded conformity. High school graduation was a turning point. Elizabeth's acceptance letters promised bright futures in prestigious universities. Alex's path, meanwhile, narrowed. A family emergency forced him to leave, and the letters she sent were returned unanswered. The world they had imagined together, with flying circuits and impossible codes, dissolved into separate realities. She went east to ivy-covered campuses and lecture halls, climbing ladders of recognition and scholarship. He stayed behind, a brilliant mind buried under the weight of survival. Even now, years later, Elizabeth could see the echo of that boy in the janitor standing in Torchlight's hallway. The same sharp eyes, the same stubborn set of his jaw, but tempered now by exhaustion and the quiet shame of unfulfilled potential. She thought of all the things they had planned together, all the inventions, the late-night debates, the small triumphs. None of it had faded from memory. A pang of regret cut through her chest. The city lights beyond the warehouse seemed dimmer for a moment, and she realized how fragile their lives had been, how easily brilliance could be hidden or lost. The path she had chosen had been clear, but Alex's had been twisted, unseen, and almost erased. And yet, even in that erasure, she could feel the pulse of what had always been, the daring, relentless mind that had once promised her the impossible. She swallowed hard, whispering under her breath, "Maybe it's not too late." Elizabeth lingered near the corridor long after the last staff had left, the hum of Torchlight's servers filling the silence. Her eyes followed Alex as he moved from room to room, mop in hand, wiping footprints off polished concrete. The sight unsettled her. How could someone who once imagined changing the world with her be reduced to this? "Alex," she called softly, stepping closer. He froze, head tilting as if she had suddenly appeared out of the shadows. He blinked, hesitation etched across his features. "Elizabeth, I'm busy." She took a step forward. "I know, but I want to talk." He swallowed hard, the mop trembling slightly in his grip. Shame weighed him down like a physical force. Years of missteps, of doors slammed shut, had carved deep lines into his pride. "I'm just cleaning," he muttered. "I don't want trouble." "No trouble," she said gently. "Just a conversation. Remember the old lab in your garage? The rockets and circuits we tried to build? The late nights arguing over designs? That's who I'm seeing, not the uniform." He hesitated, jaw tight. Pride and embarrassment warring inside him. "That was a long time ago, Elizabeth. Things didn't go as planned." "I know," she said, her voice steady. "And I want to hear about it." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, tentatively, Alex spoke, words heavy with the years he had tried to bury. He told her about the nights he had spent fixing old electronics for neighbors, the broken drones he had salvaged, the server glitches he had quietly repaired after hours at small jobs. His voice carried a spark that Elizabeth remembered vividly, a mix of defiance and curiosity, the same relentless hunger to understand how things worked. She watched him closely. Even in the worn uniform, even under the weight of failure and invisibility, he was still brilliant. Sparks of the boy who once saved her from a flooded street, who had shielded her from bullies, who had challenged her intellect for hours on end, shone in his eyes. "You've been keeping a lot to yourself," Elizabeth said softly. "I had to," he replied, looking away. "Nobody listens to the janitor." Her chest tightened. Compassion surged, but so did anger, not at him, but at the circumstances that had brought him here. She knew, instinctively, that if anyone could still bring Torchlight a breakthrough, it would be him. "Then let me listen," she said. "Let me help. Just show me what you've been doing." Alex hesitated, pride rising, shame lingering. "I don't want pity. I don't want anyone thinking this is some charity story." Elizabeth shook her head, firm yet gentle. "It's not charity. It's recognition. And you deserve it." A long pause. He studied her, the memories of their shared past flickering in his gaze. Slowly, a faint smile broke through the weariness. A spark, small but undeniable, returned. "All right," he murmured. "I'll talk, but only if it stays between us for now." Elizabeth nodded, a quiet relief flooding her. For the first time in years, the old connection between them, friendship, trust, mutual respect, breathed again. And deep inside, she knew this reunion wasn't just personal, it might be the pivot that Torchlight desperately needed. Torchlight was humming with life, but beneath the hum, tension simmered. Elizabeth felt it before she even stepped into the main hall that morning. The sharp glances, the whispered conversations, the subtle side eyes from investors visiting for routine check-ins. Her empire, small, defiant, built on grit and unconventional talent, was suddenly under siege. Across town, rival accelerators had started a quiet campaign. Blog posts questioned her management style. Whispers at networking events implied Torchlight was reckless, disorganized, a hub for naive dreamers. Even investors, once loyal, sent pointed emails, questioning the long-term viability of her hub. "Is she overreaching?" one asked. "Does she have the discipline to scale?" Another hinted at the risks of letting untested staff handle sensitive projects. Each message was a needle, small but precise, and Elizabeth felt them all. She walked through the hub, observing her team. Most were immersed in their work, unaware of the storm looming beyond these walls. But Alex, he was a target. Even the youngest engineers sneered or muttered under their breath when he passed. "Just the janitor," someone whispered, as if the title alone defined his worth. Alex's pride flared, subtle but unmistakable. He didn't respond, only continued to quietly maintain servers, repair broken drones, and troubleshoot circuits in ways that none of them noticed, yet. Elizabeth approached him quietly, sensing the silent friction. "Are they bothering you?" she asked, voice low. He shook his head, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed him. "Just people assuming what they want to assume," he muttered. She felt a pang in her chest. The same brilliant mind that once designed rockets and solved impossible puzzles was now invisible to the very team that relied on innovation for their jobs. And yet, she also saw resilience. He refused to fight back publicly, kept his pride intact, and quietly focused on the work that mattered. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's attention was split. Her inbox overflowed with investor concerns. A venture capitalist she had once admired hinted at pulling funding if she didn't tame the chaos. Another suggested she needed more formal processes, more oversight. It was a familiar narrative, but this time it felt personal. Torchlight was a reflection of her values: freedom, ingenuity, inclusivity, and they were questioning everything she stood for. She moved to the observation deck above the main workspace, letting her gaze sweep across the hub. The servers glowed softly, and drones hung suspended midair, paused in testing routines. This was her creation, her rebellion against the world that had once told her she wasn't enough. And now, with rivals whispering, investors doubting, and Alex's brilliance unseen by most, the fault lines beneath her carefully built empire were widening. Her hand tightened around the railing. "They don't see what I see," she murmured to herself. But she also knew something vital. The real strength of Torchlight wasn't just in her vision, it was in the people she had believed in even when the world hadn't. And if anyone could tip the balance in her favor, it might just be the one person no one else thought mattered. As she turned back toward the chaos below, Elizabeth felt the weight of leadership pressing down, heavier than ever. Every decision, every conversation, every overlooked detail could tip Torchlight over the edge. And in the shadows of her own hub, Alex worked silently, a quiet force against a rising tide of doubt. Elizabeth had never intended to wander into the server room that night. The hum of the machines had always been a comfort, a background pulse to Torchlight's heartbeat. Yet, something pulled her toward the shadows, toward the dim glow of monitors she rarely visited after hours. And there she saw him. Alex. Kneeling before an open server panel, his fingers deftly adjusting circuits and tracing wires with a precision that left her breathless. The mop and uniform he wore during the day were gone in her mind, replaced by the boy she remembered, hands always moving, always creating, eyes alight with ideas bigger than the room itself. He didn't notice her at first, absorbed in recalibrating a drone control system. The screen flickered under his touch, errors disappearing as if they had never existed. Codes, algorithms, mechanical schematics, he was untangling them with effortless grace. Every adjustment whispered of talent, brilliance buried beneath years of survival and unseen labor. Alex, she breathed, stepping closer. The words startled him, but only for a moment. He looked up, eyes wary, guarded, the pride and shame of uncounted failures flashing across his face. "Elizabeth," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "I had to see," she replied, voice firm. "I had to see what you've been doing. All of it." He hesitated, then leaned back, running a hand through his hair. The defenses rose and fell in a silent battle between pride and vulnerability. "You don't understand. Most nights I just fix things quietly. Nobody notices. Nobody cares." She stepped closer, memories flooding back. The nights under the old oak tree, solving impossible puzzles, building inventions from scrap. "I notice, Alex. I've always noticed." The confession tumbled out in halting words. "After school, I had to drop out. Mom was sick, couldn't work, and Dad, he wasn't there. I took whatever jobs I could. Mechanics, night shifts, temporary contracts. I patched broken electronics for neighbors, for pocket change. Tried to keep my skills alive. But doors closed. Every time I thought I could come back, they slammed in my face." Elizabeth's heart ached, a deep, burning pang that carried the weight of wasted potential. The boy she had raced down sidewalks with, the boy who had dreamed rockets and machines, had been trapped, invisible to the world that should have celebrated him. "But it's still here," she said softly, gesturing to the intricate systems and circuits he had repaired. "Your mind, it's still brilliant. It's just been waiting for someone to see it." Alex's eyes flickered with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself in years, a fragile glimmer of hope mingled with the raw weight of regret. "I thought it was gone. Thought maybe I missed my chance." "No chance is ever truly gone," Elizabeth whispered. "Not if you still breathe, not if you still care about the work you love. And you do, Alex. I can see it." For a long moment, he stared at her, silence thick between them. Then, slowly, the tension softened, pride and shame giving way to trust. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that the past didn't have to define the future, that hidden genius could still rise. Elizabeth stepped back, letting him return to his work. But the truth had settled in her chest. Torchlight wasn't just her hub anymore. It was the place where buried talent could be unearthed. And Alex, he was the spark she had been waiting for. Elizabeth stood at the edge of the lab, arms crossed, watching Alex dismantle a stubborn drone motor with the same precision he had always carried as a boy. Her mind raced, weighing options, risks, and timing. Torchlight faced challenges that no ordinary engineer could solve. A new cybersecurity protocol, experimental drone algorithms, and network infrastructure that could collapse under the weight of their growth. And Alex, he was the one person she trusted could untangle it all. She stepped forward, careful not to startle him. "Alex," she began, voice steady. "I want to make you an offer." He paused, screwdriver frozen mid-turn. A guarded flicker passed over his face. I can't," he said quickly, almost reflexively. "I'm just a janitor. Everyone sees it, Elizabeth. If I mess up, if I fail, they'll never let me live it down. I don't care what they see, she said firmly, meeting his gaze. I care what I see. And I see a mind that can fix things, solve problems, and, most importantly, improve Torchlight in ways no one else can. Alex shook his head, pride and fear warring in his expression. It's not the same, Elizabeth. Back then we were kids. Now this is real. Jobs, investors, deadlines, people depending on me. If I screw up, it's not just a circuit, it's my life, your company, your reputation. Elizabeth softened, remembering their shared history, the long nights under the oak tree, the laughter, the arguments, the shared triumphs. Alex, she said gently, I'm not asking you to lead the company. Not yet. I'm asking you to help quietly. To fix what's broken, patch the gaps, troubleshoot before anyone else even knows there's a problem. It's small, but it matters. His eyes flickered, scanning the lab, the complex network of wires and servers. He remembered late nights working on projects he would never show anyone, nights when failure meant survival, not applause. The old thrill, the old spark, awakened. I don't know, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm scared, Elizabeth. Scared of failing, of being laughed at, of not being enough. She stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. Do you remember when you saved me from that flood in middle school? You didn't think about the risk, didn't calculate what people would say. You just acted. That's who I know. That's the Alex I've always believed in. He swallowed hard, pride and fear colliding with memory. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased, and the faintest smile appeared. All right, he said, voice low but steady. I'll do it. Quietly. Just let me do it my way. Elizabeth nodded, relief flooding her. That's all I ask. Just your mind, your skills, your instincts. Everything else can wait. And thank you for trusting me too. He hesitated a moment longer, then returned to the motor, hands moving with renewed purpose. The lab hummed louder, as if sensing the rekindling of something powerful, a friendship, a trust, and the silent promise of brilliance ready to emerge. In that quiet exchange, Elizabeth realized that sometimes the greatest leaps weren't made in boardrooms or press conferences. They were made when someone gave the forgotten genius a chance, and he dared to take it. Torchlight had always thrived on controlled chaos, a space where innovation was messy but brilliant. But that week, chaos had turned predatory. The hum of servers no longer felt comforting. It vibrated with tension. Something was wrong. Files disappeared. Prototype drones failed mid-test. Algorithms that had worked flawlessly yesterday now misfired with inexplicable errors. Elizabeth watched the team stumble, their confidence shaken. Whispers of doubt ran through the workspace, subtle but corrosive. Maybe Elizabeth overreached, one intern muttered. Maybe Torchlight isn't ready for this scale, another said under her breath. It was as if the walls themselves had absorbed anxiety, transmitting it to everyone within. Then came the emails. Anonymous, vicious, questioning Elizabeth's leadership, painting Torchlight as reckless, mismanaged, a breeding ground for failure. Investors called with curt voices and pointed concerns. We need assurance this isn't a ticking time bomb, one demanded. Another hinted at pulling funds if the errors weren't corrected immediately. Elizabeth's chest tightened. Torchlight's small empire, once defiant, now felt fragile. And then the hackers arrived, not physically, but through the wires. Security logs flagged unauthorized access attempts, malicious scripts designed to disrupt experiments and sabotage prototypes. Every test they had scheduled for the week now teetered on the edge of disaster. Alex worked silently in the shadows, moving between servers, circuits, and debug scripts. His fingers flew across keyboards, tracing malicious code, isolating errors that had nearly been catastrophic. While the rest of the team panicked, he remained calm, his mind threading together solutions no one else saw. Elizabeth approached him during a brief lull, seeing the tension in his jaw but also the familiar glimmer in his eyes, the spark of the boy who once solved impossible puzzles for fun. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," he said tersely. "Just undoing mistakes no one realizes existed yet. "You're saving us," she whispered, awe and relief flooding her voice. He shrugged, focusing. "Just doing what I do best." Hours stretched into night. Team members stared at failed prototypes, their frustration simmering, morale at its lowest point since Torchlight's founding. But Alex moved methodically, unseen, untiring. A misaligned drone motor was recalibrated, corrupted lines of code rewritten, rogue algorithms neutralized. One by one, potential disasters were defused before anyone even knew they existed. By the time Elizabeth returned from a tense call with a skeptical investor, the immediate crisis had passed. The servers hummed steadily, drones hovered flawlessly, and the malicious intrusions had been contained. She turned to Alex, who sat slumped but focused, eyes bright despite the exhaustion etched on his face. "Who? Fixed it," she said, disbelief and admiration mingling in her voice. He gave a small, almost sheepish smile. "Didn't want anyone to panic. Things get messy when people panic." Elizabeth's heart swelled with respect and relief. Torchlight's survival had hung by a thread, but Alex's hidden brilliance had become its lifeline. And in that moment, she realized that the quiet genius she had rediscovered wasn't just a gift from the past, it was the key to Torchlight's future. The night settled over Austin, city lights shimmering through the windows, but inside the warehouse, a silent truth had been revealed. The overlooked, the underestimated, the invisible mind was the very thing that could defy the chaos and turn disaster into triumph. Elizabeth didn't hear the first whispers. They crept in through Slack notifications, cryptic messages that didn't make sense until the evidence appeared, proprietary designs, confidential investor strategies, and unreleased prototypes were circulating outside Torchlight. Someone inside had betrayed them, selling secrets to rivals who had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opening. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Her phone rang incessantly, investors demanding explanations, partners questioning her judgment, legal advisors pressing for immediate containment. The small empire she had built with so much defiance and sweat now teetered on the edge of ruin. In the boardroom, she stood with clenched fists, pacing as her team scrambled to contain the leak. Faces around her were pale, panic creeping into the usually steady crew. She felt the weight of responsibility crush her chest. Every decision she had made now carried the terrifying possibility of collapse. And then she saw him. Alex. Calm, collected, eyes narrowing as he scanned logs, traced the breach, piecing together the puzzle others couldn't even see. The janitor, the invisible one, he had become Torchlight's unexpected sentinel. Elizabeth approached, her voice tight. "Alex, we're in real trouble. This could destroy everything." He didn't flinch. "I know. And I have a plan." "You have a plan?" she asked, incredulous. He nodded. "But it's risky. Both technically and socially. It'll mean confronting the person who leaked this, and proving the vulnerabilities to investors directly. No hiding, no excuses. Full transparency." Elizabeth's stomach knotted. Exposing the insider could create chaos, but burying it would destroy trust. Her pride wanted to protect the company's image, her instinct screamed that this was a disaster. But she also knew Alex had a rare clarity, one that could turn the tide if she trusted him. "All right," she said, her voice measured. "Do it. But we do it together." For the next 24 hours, Alex worked like a storm contained in human form. He reconstructed compromised systems, created airtight encryption patches, and designed a clear presentation showing exactly what had been stolen, how it had been mitigated, and why Torchlight's innovation pipeline remained secure. Simultaneously, he confronted the insider, careful, controlled, ensuring no further leaks while extracting full accountability. When the investor call came, Elizabeth watched as Alex stepped forward with confidence, presenting technical details with precision, honesty, and authority. Questions were sharp, some bordering on accusatory, but Alex answered them all, not hiding the breach, but showing the depth of Torchlight's safeguards and resilience. His words, combined with Elizabeth's leadership, shifted panic into cautious relief. As the call ended, Elizabeth exhaled for the first time in hours. Her empire had not collapsed. The insiders were held accountable, the investors reassured, and the system secured. She turned to Alex, eyes glistening. "You saved us," she said softly. He shrugged, but there was a quiet pride in his expression. "We saved us. Together." In that moment, Elizabeth realized a hard truth. Torchlight's survival depended not just on her vision or determination, but on the mind she trusted, the friends she had rediscovered, and the courage to lean on those who had been overlooked. Despair had almost broken her, but in resilience, and in the hidden brilliance of her oldest ally, she found a new kind of strength. The night fell over Austin, city lights flickering. Inside Torchlight, the walls no longer seemed to echo panic. They hummed with the quiet power of collaboration, trust, and hard-earned redemption. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, a gathering of industry leaders, journalists, and investors, all curious to see how Torchlight would respond to the recent storm. Elizabeth stood backstage, shoulders squared, heart hammering. The pressure was immense. Every word spoken here could either cement their reputation or unravel months of painstaking work. Alex adjusted his shirt nervously beside her. Gone was the uniform of the janitor. Today, he stood as a technical authority, the embodiment of the brilliance Elizabeth had always remembered. The room, however, was unaware of the years he had spent in obscurity, the battles fought quietly in basements and server rooms. Elizabeth caught his eye and nodded. "You ready?" He drew a deep breath. "Let's do it." The curtains parted, and they stepped into the spotlight. Murmurs swept through the audience as Alex approached the podium first, calm but resolute. Screens behind them displayed Torchlight's network, prototypes, and the security breaches they had endured. "4 months, Alex began, voice steady. "Our hub has faced challenges from competitors, internal sabotage, and questions about our processes. Many overlooked the work done behind the scenes, work I've quietly performed alongside my team to ensure Torchlight continues innovating safely." Whispers rippled through the crowd. He spoke of the drones recalibrated in the dead of night, the corrupted lines of code rewritten, and the network vulnerabilities patched before catastrophe struck. Every technical detail he presented was precise, accessible, and undeniably impactful. Elizabeth took the stage beside him, her presence grounding him. "What Alex has demonstrated," she said, "is that talent and dedication are not defined by title or visibility. Torchlight thrives because of people like him, unseen, undervalued, yet indispensable." The audience was captivated, some leaning forward in disbelief, others nodding in respect. Analysts who had whispered doubts about the janitor now saw him as the architect of Torchlight's resilience. Investors exchanged impressed glances, journalists furiously scribbling notes. Alex paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "I may have been overlooked," he continued, "but every obstacle I faced, every setback, shaped my perspective and honed my skills. Today, I stand not just as a contributor, but as proof that potential should never be underestimated." A wave of applause swept the room. Critics were silenced, rivals' whispers drowned in recognition of truth and competence. Elizabeth felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for the friend who had fought silently for years and now finally claimed his due. After the session, media interviews, and investor calls, Torchlight emerged not only unscathed but stronger. Reputation had shifted, respect had been earned through humility, persistence, and undeniable skill. Alex's redemption was complete, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a fully acknowledged force within the company. Backstage, Elizabeth turned to him, voice low but warm. "You did it. They see you now." Alex smiled, relief and satisfaction mingling in his eyes. "We did it. Together." And in that moment, Torchlight, once vulnerable, doubted, and on the edge, stood resilient, a testament to trust, collaboration, and the power of giving overlooked genius a chance. The reckoning wasn't just against rivals. It was a triumph of respect, humility, and the quiet heroism that had always existed in the shadows. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Torchlight's main hall, illuminating the workspace that had once seemed fragile, almost on the brink of collapse. Elizabeth moved among the teams, observing the quiet hum of productivity, the careful collaboration, and, most importantly, the renewed energy in every corner. Torchlight's reputation had been restored, its investors reassured, and its innovations now stronger than ever. Yet the true victory lay elsewhere. Alex walked past her, clipboard in hand, discussing a coding challenge with a junior engineer. Gone was the hesitant, invisible figure who had once avoided notice. He moved with confidence, offering guidance, mentoring colleagues, and sharing insights that were shaping Torchlight's next wave of projects. His brilliance was no longer hidden, his contributions no longer overlooked. Elizabeth felt a warmth spread across her chest. The journey had been long, from the shock of seeing him as a janitor, to rediscovering his genius, to trusting him with Torchlight's survival, and now watching him thrive in a role befitting his talent. Later, she found him in the quiet corner of the lab where they had first reunited. The hum of servers and blinking lights created a soft, comforting backdrop. "You've come a long way," she said softly, leaning against the workbench. He glanced up, a small, genuine smile tugging at his lips. "We've both come a long way," he replied. "I wouldn't be here without you, without your faith in me." Elizabeth shook her head, her eyes glistening. "No, Alex. You would have found a way eventually. I just helped open the door." He nodded, taking in the moment of stillness. For years, he had carried the weight of missed opportunities, of invisible potential, of pride battered by circumstance. But now, the burden seemed lighter, replaced by purpose and trust. "Do you remember that old dream of ours?" he asked, voice low, almost nostalgic. "Changing the world, building something that actually matters?" "I remember," she said, smiling. "And it's not buried anymore. Not here, not now. Torchlight is just the beginning." They walked together through the hall, observing teams brainstorming, coding, and testing prototypes. Alex paused to advise a group, his voice confident yet patient. A junior developer looked at him with admiration, clearly absorbing both knowledge and inspiration. Elizabeth felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Torchlight was becoming more than a tech hub. It was a place where second chances were tangible, where potential was nurtured, and where respect transcended titles. In the rooftop garden later that evening, Austin's skyline painting the horizon, Elizabeth and Alex paused. The city lights shimmered, reflecting the endless possibilities that lay ahead. "You know," Alex said, eyes tracing the horizon, "it's funny. I used to think being invisible was safe. That no one could disappoint you if no one noticed you. But now I wouldn't trade this trust, responsibility, the chance to make a real impact, for anything." Elizabeth placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you won't have to. Torchlight is yours too. Your ideas, your guidance, your brilliance belongs here." A quiet victory settled over them, the kind that doesn't scream in headlines or demand applause. It is the victory of resilience, friendship, and the courage to embrace second chances. They smiled at each other, not as CEO and former janitor, not as mentor and protege, but as two old friends whose shared dream had endured, survived storms, and finally found its life again. Torchlight thrived, yes, but more importantly, so did the bond that had always mattered most. And in that quiet triumph, Elizabeth and Alex knew one truth above all. Sometimes, the greatest victories are the ones that allow the heart and mind to heal, rebuild, and soar together. Let us know where you are watching from and what you think in the comment. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on more inspiring stories.